You're declining our offer? Good luck finding something better, the hiring manager said, throwing his head back with a laugh that echoed against the glass walls of the conference room. His colleagues exchanged amused glances as if I'd told the funniest joke they'd heard all week. I gripped my portfolio tighter, heat rising up my neck. My expertise in rare earth material recycling commands a higher market value. 8 years of specialized experience isn't reflected in this offer. We have 20 eager candidates who'd accept this salary without question, he replied, tapping my resume dismissively. Perhaps you've overestimated your importance. Something snapped inside me. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and looked him directly in the eyes. No, I haven't, but you certainly have underestimated it. Walking out, I heard them chuckling behind me. 3 weeks of interviews, ending like this. I had 2 weeks until rent was due, and dwindling savings. I never imagined that within 72 hours, everything would change. Before I tell you how I turned that humiliation into the greatest career triumph of my life, I want you to think about a time when someone undervalued your worth. Remember how it felt? That burning in your chest? That voice inside saying, I deserve better. Hold on to that feeling, because what happens next might just give you the courage to stand your ground the next time someone tries to diminish your value. My name is Belinda Arvello, and until 6 months ago, I was the unsung genius behind one of the biggest breakthroughs in rare earth material recycling technology. The kind of innovation that environmental scientists and manufacturing executives dream about. A method that reduced extraction costs by 42% while increasing yield purity. The kind of innovation that made the cover of industry magazines, with my boss's name featured prominently while mine was nowhere to be found. I'd always been the quiet one, the meticulous researcher who stayed late analyzing test results while others networked at industry events. My parents, both high school teachers from Puerto Rico who'd settled in Michigan, had instilled in me a belief that excellence speaks for itself. Let your work be your voice, my father always said. For years I believed that. Until the day I watched my discovery, the culmination of 3 years of tireless research, being presented at the annual Earth Resources Conference by my supervisor Meredith. She stood there in the spotlight, fielding questions about my process, accepting accolades for my discovery, while I sat in the audience, invisible. I'd developed the chemical bonding theory that made the extraction possible. I'd run thousands of tests in that basement lab with outdated equipment. I'd sacrificed weekends and holidays. And yet there I was, reduced to a mere footnote in her presentation, with assistance from the research team. That night in my hotel room, I made myself a promise. Never again would I allow my contributions to be diminished. Never again would I let someone else take credit for my brilliance. Never again would I stay silent about my value. So when the job offer came from Greenward Technologies, a rising company in sustainable manufacturing with all their environmentally friendly buzzwords and promises of innovation, I was cautiously optimistic. Their recruitment process had been intense. 3 technical interviews, a presentation of my research methodology, meetings with 5 different department heads. They seemed genuinely impressed by my portfolio. The hiring manager, Nolan, had nodded appreciatively during my presentation on molecular separation techniques. Yet when the offer finally arrived, the salary was barely above what I'd made as a mid-level researcher at my previous company. For a senior position requiring specialized expertise that fewer than 50 people in the country possessed, it was insultingly low. I prepared meticulously for the negotiation meeting. I researched market rates, compiled data on comparable positions, practiced my talking points. I walked into that conference room ready to advocate for myself professionally. What I wasn't prepared for was ridicule. After the humiliating meeting, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my racing heart. Had I just made a catastrophic mistake? In this economy, with sustainability initiatives facing budget cuts across the industry, had I just walked away from what might be my only opportunity? My phone buzzed, a text from my sister, Lucia. How did it go? I couldn't bring myself to respond immediately. Instead, I drove home to my apartment, a modest 1-bedroom with rent that suddenly seemed dauntingly expensive. As I heated leftover rice and beans for dinner, I finally called Lucia. You did what? She exclaimed after I explained what happened. In this economy? Belinda, are you crazy? They offered junior-level pay for senior-level work, I explained, pacing my small kitchen. The hiring manager actually laughed when I countered. But your apartment, your bills. I'll figure it out. Lucia sighed through the phone. Look, I support you standing up for yourself, but be realistic. Maybe call them back tomorrow? Say you reconsidered? And start a job knowing I'm undervalued from day one? No thanks. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and applied to 14 positions. I scheduled 2 interviews for the following week. I updated my professional networking profiles. I calculated exactly how long my savings would last if I cut back on everything but essentials. 53 days. Not great, but not impossible. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run, pushing myself harder than usual, trying to outpace the doubt chasing me. Had I been arrogant? Was my work really as valuable as I believed? Maybe Meredith had been right to take the credit. Maybe my contribution wasn't as significant as I thought. No, I refused to let those thoughts take root. I knew my worth. I knew what I had accomplished. I knew what I could bring to any company smart enough to recognize it. 3 days passed. I prepared for my upcoming interviews, researching the companies thoroughly. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. This time, I'd discuss compensation expectations early in the process. Then, at 2:17 p.m., my personal cell phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, this is Belinda. Ms. Arvello? This is Darren Winslow, CEO of Greenward Technologies. My breath caught. I'd never spoken with the CEO during the interview process, had never even seen him in the building. I heard you turned down our offer, he continued, his voice measured but curious. That's unusual. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. After you left, our engineering team reviewed your portfolio again. Specifically, your molecular separation technique for lithium extraction. They believe your recycling method could revolutionize our production line. The projected savings are substantial, far more than we initially calculated. I sat down at my kitchen table, processing this reversal. Miss Arvello, are you there? Yes, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I'm considering what it would take for me to join a company where qualified candidates are openly mocked for knowing their value. The silence that followed was satisfying. I understand your hesitation, he finally said. What would it take to bring you on board? Name your price. I'd thought about this moment, not specifically with Greenward, but in general. What would it take for me to feel valued, to feel secure, that my contributions wouldn't be exploited or diminished? I'd need 3 things, I said firmly. First, market rate compensation plus 15% to account for the initial disrespect. Second, I lead the materials division with full autonomy over research directions and project implementation. Third, and most importantly, I implement transparent salary bands across all departments with no gender or racial disparities. There was another pause. The first 2 are doable. The third is unconventional for our industry. So was laughing at a qualified candidate, I replied. Yet here we are. Let me be clear, Darren said. You're asking for salary transparency across the entire organization? Yes, with particular attention to addressing historical undervaluation of women and minorities in STEM fields. I've experienced it firsthand, and I won't be part of perpetuating it. He cleared his throat. I need to discuss this with the board. Can I call you back tomorrow? Of course, I said. I'll await your call. 10 minutes after hanging up, an email arrived from Nolan, the hiring manager who had laughed in my face. Ms. Arvello, I understand you spoke with our CEO. Please reconsider our offer. The manufacturing project has already been scheduled around implementing your extraction method. We can't meet the deadline without your expertise. I apologize if our previous meeting ended on a negative note. I'd be happy to discuss terms that would make you comfortable joining our team. The contrast between his previous mockery and current desperation was striking. I closed my laptop without replying. That evening, my phone rang again. Darren Winslow. Ms. Arvello, I've spoken with the board. We'd like to accept your terms, with one modification. We'll implement the transparent salary bands, but would like to do so gradually over 6 months to allow for proper review and adjustment of existing contracts. Would that be acceptable? My heart raced. I'd expected pushback, negotiation, perhaps a counteroffer, not immediate acceptance. That would be acceptable, I replied, trying to keep the surprise from my voice. I'd want to be directly involved in the review process. Of course. We'll have legal draft a contract tomorrow. When can you start? 2 weeks later, I walked into Greenwood Technologies as the new director of material sciences. My salary was double the original offer, with a signing bonus that covered 6 months of my rent. My new office had a view of the city skyline and a small adjoining lab for preliminary testing. On my first day, I requested the compensation data for my entire division. When HR hesitated, I reminded them of the agreement with the CEO. The spreadsheet arrived in my inbox by noon. The patterns were exactly what I'd suspected. Women in similar roles were making 22% less than their male counterparts. People with Hispanic surnames like mine averaged 18% lower compensation than others with identical qualifications. The longest-serving employees, particularly those who weren't aggressive negotiators, were the most underpaid relative to new hires. I spent my first week learning the operation, meeting my team, and reviewing the current projects. Everyone was polite, but I could sense their curiosity and perhaps skepticism. Who was this newcomer who'd negotiated directly with the CEO? What made her so special? On Friday afternoon, I called a division meeting. 57 employees crowded into the conference room, including Nolan, who now technically reported to me, a fact he seemed to be struggling to accept, based on his tight smile and rigid posture. Thank you all for welcoming me this week. I began. I've been impressed by the innovation happening here, but I've also identified areas where we can improve, not just in our technical processes, but in how we value our people. I clicked to my first slide, anonymized salary data showing the disparities. This is our current compensation structure, with names removed. As you can see, we have significant inconsistencies that don't correlate with experience, performance, or contribution. The room grew very quiet. People leaned forward, searching for where they might fall on the charts. Over the next 6 months, we'll be implementing transparent salary bands across the company. Every role will have a clear compensation range based on skills and experience, not on negotiation tactics or... I paused, making brief eye contact with Nolan. Personal bias. If you're enjoying this story so far, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Click the bell icon so you don't miss the second part where you'll discover exactly how I transformed that toxic workplace, confronted the people who tried to undermine me, and ultimately created the most satisfying professional revenge of my career. Trust me, what happens next is something every person who's ever been undervalued needs to hear. After the meeting, several employees lingered, wanting to speak with me privately. A research analyst named Paloma approached first, her hands fidgeting with her tablet. What you showed us, is that really happening here? She asked quietly. Yes, and we're going to fix it. I've been here 3 years, she confessed. Last month I discovered my new colleague, a man with half my experience, makes $15,000 more than me. When I mentioned it to Nolan, he said discussing salaries was unprofessional. By Monday morning, whispers were traveling through the building. Some employees were hopeful, others suspicious, and a few, particularly those benefiting from the current system, were visibly hostile. Nolan appeared at my office door at 9:30 a.m., not bothering to knock. You've created quite the stir, he said, claiming the chair across from my desk without being invited. The executive team is concerned about what you presented on Friday. The data speaks for itself, I replied, continuing to review the project timeline on my screen. Data can be misinterpreted, he countered. Some employees have more negotiation leverage based on their unique skills. Others accept less because they value work, life balance, or other benefits. Presenting raw numbers without context creates unnecessary tension. I finally looked up. Is that what happened when I negotiated with you? I lacked unique skills but valued work-life balance? His expression tightened. That was different. It wasn't. It was exactly the same pattern shown in that data, but we're moving forward with transparency, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes those who've benefited from secrecy. He leaned forward. Look, Belinda. May I call you Belinda? Dr. Arvelo is fine. A flash of irritation crossed his face. Dr. Arvelo, then. You're new here. You don't understand our culture, our history. These kinds of dramatic changes could seriously impact morale. Whose morale, exactly? The underpaid employees who just discovered they've been systematically devalued? Or the overpaid executives who've benefited from that system? Nolan stood up. The CEO may have approved this initiative, but implementation requires cooperation from multiple departments. My team controls the project budget allocations. Just something to consider. The threat was clear. If I pushed forward with compensation equity, he would obstruct my projects. Thank you for making your position so transparent, I said calmly. I appreciate knowing exactly where we stand. After he left, I opened my email and drafted a message to Darren Winslow, detailing the conversation and requesting a meeting about project resource allocation. I had no intention of being intimidated after coming this far. The following weeks were challenging. While Darren publicly supported the compensation review, I discovered numerous roadblocks erected by mid-level management. Meeting invitations mysteriously disappeared from my calendar. Critical emails were buried in group threads. Equipment orders for my lab were delayed due to processing errors. But I wasn't without allies. Paloma became my most valuable team member, brilliant at both research and navigating company politics. She introduced me to others who had been marginalized. A chemical engineer named Henri, who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times despite his innovations. A lab technician named Daisy, whose protocol improvements had been implemented company-wide without recognition. Together, we worked late nights and weekends, refining my extraction method for Greenwood's specific manufacturing needs. We converted a disused storage area into an additional testing space when our equipment requests were delayed. We documented everything meticulously, every achievement, every obstacle, every accidental exclusion from critical meetings. 6 weeks into my tenure, I presented our first prototype results to the executive team. The data was irrefutable. My process increased rare earth recovery by 37%, while reducing chemical waste by 44%. The potential profit impact was in the millions. Darren was visibly impressed. Several board members asked detailed questions about implementation timelines. Only Nolan remained stone-faced, picking at perceived flaws in our testing methodology. These results are preliminary, he said dismissively, and implementation would require significant retooling of our production line, expenses not accounted for in the current budget. Actually, I countered, pulling up a detailed spreadsheet. We've calculated complete implementation costs, including retooling, additional personnel training, and a 15% contingency buffer. Even with these investments, the ROI would be realized within 9 months, with projected annual savings of $12 million thereafter. As the executives murmured appreciatively, Nolan's expression darkened. There's still the matter of production disruption during implementation, he argued. We can't afford downtime on our main line. Which is why, I continued, we've designed a phased implementation that utilizes the auxiliary line first, with only 2 48-hour windows of disruption to the main production schedule. I displayed the Gantt chart my team had prepared. The detailed plan is in your packets. By meeting's end, the board had approved expedited funding for my project. As we gathered our materials, Darren approached me. Impressive work, Dr. Arvelo. This is exactly why we brought you on board. Thank you. Though it's been challenging with certain administrative hurdles. His eyebrows raised. Hurdles? Nothing my team can't handle, I replied. But I'd like to discuss them with you privately sometime. Across the room, I noticed Nolan watching us, his knuckles white around his tablet. The next morning, I arrived to find my keycard access revoked from the main laboratory. The security desk had no explanation. I called Paloma, who let me in through a side entrance. It's getting worse, she whispered. The research server was mysteriously maintenance locked last night. We lost access to all our simulation data. Do we have backups? Yes, Henri has been mirroring everything to a secure cloud since your second week. But they don't know that. I nodded. Good. Let's continue as if we've been set back. I want to see how far they'll go. That afternoon, Nolan called an emergency department meeting, scheduling it for when I had a previously arranged video call with a key supplier. By the time I arrived, he was concluding his presentation, which is why we'll be placing Dr. Arvelo's project on a temporary hold while we reassess resource allocation, he was saying as I entered. The preliminary data, while promising, requires more verification before we commit to full implementation. That's interesting, I said loudly from the doorway. Every head turned, especially since the board approved expedited funding yesterday. Nolan's smile never wavered. Ah, Belinda, Dr. Arvelo. Glad you could join us. Yes, there was preliminary approval, but upon further review of departmental resources, I've determined we need to delay implementation until next quarter. Upon whose authority? As Chief Operations Officer, I have final approval on production scheduling. I hadn't known he held that title. It explained his level of obstruction. I see. And does the CEO know you're countermanding a board-approved initiative? A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Darren understands the complexities of production management. This isn't a cancellation, merely a postponement. Interesting. Because the reason I missed the first part of this meeting was my scheduled call with Adaptive Systems, the equipment supplier already contracted for our implementation next week. Murmurs rippled through the room. That contract hasn't been finalized, Nolan said sharply. It was signed this morning, by Darren himself. I held up my tablet showing the executed agreement. Delivery begins Monday. The blood drained from Nolan's face. Now, I continued, addressing the room, let's discuss the actual timeline we'll be working with. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined the implementation plan, assigning roles and establishing clear deliverables. Nolan remained silent, a forced smile fixed on his face, his eyes cold with fury. As the meeting concluded, he caught my arm at the door. You've made a serious miscalculation, he said quietly. This company operated successfully long before you arrived. No one is irreplaceable. I gently removed his hand. That's where you're wrong, Nolan. Some people genuinely are irreplaceable. The trick is knowing which ones. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The equipment arrived as scheduled. My team worked tirelessly, implementing the new process. When subtle sabotage occurred, incorrect parameter settings, missing catalysts, procedural errors, we anticipated and countered each one. Meanwhile, the compensation review progressed. Working with HR and finance, we identified 87 employees significantly underpaid compared to market rates and internal peers. The adjustment plan would cost the company approximately $3 million annually, a substantial sum, but one that paled in comparison to the savings my extraction process would generate. 3 months after my arrival, we activated the new system on the auxiliary production line. The results exceeded even our projections. 1% increased yield with 46% waste reduction. The board was elated. Darren began bringing potential investors and major clients to tour our facility, proudly showcasing our innovation. Nolan, however, became increasingly isolated. His attempts to undermine my project had been well documented in my regular updates to Darren. Several executives now bypassed him, coming directly to me with questions about materials and production improvements. Then came the company's quarterly town hall meeting. Traditionally, department heads presented their achievements and upcoming initiatives to the entire company. As the newest director, I was scheduled last. Nolan presented just before me, focusing on operational efficiencies his team had implemented, taking credit for several improvements actually developed by my group. I watched silently, cataloging each misrepresentation. When my turn came, I approached the podium calmly. Before I discuss the materials division's achievements, I'd like to clarify something from the previous presentation. I displayed side-by-side photographs of the production line modifications. These efficiency improvements were actually designed by Henri Nguyen from my team, who proposed them last month after identifying a bottleneck in the separation phase. I nodded toward Henri in the audience. His innovation deserves recognition. Nolan shifted uncomfortably in his seat as I continued through my presentation, highlighting each team member's contributions by name. When I reached our financial projections, I paused. As you can see, the new extraction process is exceeding expected returns. But there's another financial initiative I'd like to address. I displayed an anonymized graph showing salary adjustments across departments. Phase 1 of our compensation equity review is complete. Affected employees will see adjustments in their next paycheck. A buzz of excited whispers filled the auditorium. In the spirit of transparency, I want to explain how these adjustments were calculated. I detailed the methodology, the market comparisons, the internal equity considerations. This company's greatest asset is its people, all its people, not just those in leadership positions. Recognizing and fairly compensating everyone's contributions isn't just ethically right, it's good business. Valued employees innovate more, collaborate better, and stay longer. The applause that followed was thunderous. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nolan slip out a side door. The next morning, Darren called me to his office. Nolan was already there, along with the HR director. Dr. Arvalo, Darren began formally. Nolan has raised some serious concerns about your management approach. Nolan sat with his arms crossed, a satisfied expression on his face. He believes your compensation initiative is creating division among the staff and undermining the traditional authority structure. He's also suggested that you've been building what did you call it, Nolan? A parallel power structure, Nolan supplied, encouraging employees to bypass established management chains. I see, I said calmly. And what are your thoughts on these concerns, Darren? He leaned back. Well, that's why we're here. To discuss. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my tablet. Before we continue, I'd like to share some relevant information. I connected my device to the room's display screen. Over the past 3 months, I've documented numerous instances of administrative obstruction directed at my team and our projects. I displayed a detailed spreadsheet with dates, incidents, and supporting evidence. Deleted meeting invitations, restricted lab access, delayed equipment orders, resource allocations mysteriously reduced, project timeline adjustments made without consultation. I scrolled through page after page. Each incident individually could be dismissed as an oversight. Together, they form a clear pattern. Nolan's face flushed. This is absurd. You're manipulating routine administrative issues to create some conspiracy. I'm not finished, I continued. I also have documentation of credit misappropriation, innovations and improvements developed by my team that were presented as achievements of the operations division. I switched to video clips from various meetings, showing Nolan taking credit for work he hadn't done. Most concerning, however, is this. I pulled up email exchanges Nolan had believed were private. Communications instructing staff to delay or obstruct board. Approved projects. Direct violation of company policy and potentially fiduciary responsibility. The room fell silent. Darren's expression had transformed from concerned to stunned. How did you get those emails? Nolan demanded. Recipients who were uncomfortable with your instructions forwarded them to me. Quite a few people, actually. Darren finally found his voice. Nolan, is this accurate? It's taken completely out of context, he sputtered. This woman comes in here, disrupts established procedures, demands exceptional treatment. The extraction process she implemented will generate an estimated $14 million in additional profit this year. Darren interrupted. The compensation adjustments affect less than 10% of our operating budget while potentially reducing our historically high turnover rate. I'm not seeing the problem. The problem, Nolan said, his voice rising, is that she's undermining my authority. She went directly to you to get this job, bypassing proper channels. She demanded special treatment, special compensation. I demanded fair compensation, I corrected, for myself and for others. You know nothing about how this company operates. 8 years of specialized experience? Please, I've been in this industry for 15 years. And yet, I said quietly, you didn't recognize the potential of my extraction method until the CEO pointed it out to you. You laughed when I stated my worth. You've been trying to sabotage my work since I arrived. Why? Because I refuse to accept less than I deserve? Darren held up his hand. That's enough. Nolan, I need to speak with you privately. Dr. Arvello, thank you for this information. We'll continue our discussion later. I gathered my materials and left, closing the door behind me but lingering in the adjacent hallway. Through the not quite soundproof walls, I heard Darren's voice rise. Completely unacceptable behavior. The board will. 2 hours later, a company-wide email announced a reorganization of leadership structure. Nolan would be transitioning to an advisory role effective immediately. The operations division would temporarily report directly to the CEO until a replacement could be found. The following week, Darren called me back to his office. I'd like to offer you a promotion, he said without preamble. Executive Vice President of Innovation and Operations. You'd oversee both your current division and the operations team. I raised my eyebrows. That's a significant expansion of responsibilities. With compensation adjusted accordingly, of course. He slid a paper across the desk. The figure made me blink. You've demonstrated exceptional technical expertise, he continued. But more importantly, you've shown leadership qualities we desperately need. You identify problems, develop solutions, and stand by your principles even when it's difficult. Those are rare traits. I studied him carefully. And the Compensation Transparency Initiative continues as planned. In fact, I'd like you to accelerate it. The board has reviewed the initial data and agrees we need to address these disparities company-wide. I nodded slowly. In that case, I accept. 6 months after walking out of that humiliating interview, I sat at the head of the conference table in the same room where Nolan had laughed at my counteroffer. The space had been renovated, brighter lighting, new technology, even the chairs were different, but the transformation of the company culture was even more dramatic. The compensation review was complete. Every employee now understood exactly how their salary was determined and what they needed to do to advance. Productivity had increased 23%. Turnover had dropped by half. My extraction process had been fully implemented across all production lines, generating savings that exceeded our most optimistic projections. 3 competitors had already approached us about licensing the technology. As the executive team filed in for our strategic planning session, I noticed a new face, a young woman clutching a portfolio, looking exactly as nervous as I had felt during my interviews. Everyone, this is Akira Tanaka, Darren introduced. She's joining us as our new environmental compliance specialist. I smiled at her. Welcome, Akira, we're glad to have you. After the meeting, she approached me hesitantly. Dr. Arvello? I just wanted to say, your work on rare earth recycling has been revolutionary. It's why I wanted to join Greenward. Thank you, that means a lot. She glanced around to ensure no one was listening. I also heard about what you did with the compensation structure. My previous employer had similar issues. It's inspiring to see someone actually fix the problem instead of just acknowledging it. I thought about my journey, from being mocked in a job interview to transforming an entire company culture. Never let anyone tell you what you're worth, I told her, and never stay silent when you see others being undervalued. As she left, my phone buzzed with a news alert. My previous employer, the one where Meredith had taken credit for my work, was struggling after failing to keep pace with new extraction technologies. Their stock had dropped 30% in 3 months. I smiled and closed the notification. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to others, it's what you build for yourself and those around you. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. I'd love to hear in the comments about a time when you stood your ground and demanded your worth, or maybe when you wish you had. Has anyone ever underestimated you only to regret it later? Share your experiences below. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another story of triumph over those who try to diminish your value. Remember, knowing your worth isn't arrogance. It's self-respect. And sometimes, it's the first step toward changing not just your life, but an entire system. How does it feel to be replaceable? The question hung over our cafeteria table, silencing all conversation. My fork paused midway to my mouth. 5 coworkers suddenly became intensely interested in their lunch trays, eyes down, shoulders hunched. Terrence leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He deliberately raised his voice when asking the question, ensuring neighboring tables could hear. I carefully placed my fork down and dabbed the corner of my mouth with my napkin. "What an interesting question to ask during lunch," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. "Just thinking about the future," Terrence continued, examining his watch. "The expensive one he mentioned purchasing at least weekly. Budget reviews are coming. Executive team needs to know who's truly essential." His eyes fixed on me. "And who isn't?" I felt Faye's knee press against mine under the table. Silent support. Wyatt cleared his throat but said nothing. "Some positions seem important until you look closer," Terrence added, staring directly at me now. "Like yours, Merritt." A few awkward chuckles bubbled around the table. Darcy suddenly needed something from the salad bar and escaped. That's when I noticed Imani, our CEO, approaching with her tray. She'd been eating just 2 tables away. "This sounds like an engaging discussion," she said, settling into the empty chair beside me. "Please, don't stop on my account." Terrence's expression shifted instantly, smile widening as he straightened his posture. "Just discussing organizational priorities, Imani." "I gathered that much," she replied, unwrapping her silverware. She turned to me. "Is that analysis ready for review?" I nodded. "Completed this morning." "Excellent. Let's discuss it tomorrow," she said. "Both of you should attend." After she left, Terrence's eyebrows furrowed. "What analysis?" I gathered my things and stood. "Just some numbers you might find interesting." Before I share what happened next, I want to confess something. Many of you are listening to stories like mine but leaving without subscribing or dropping a like. I get it. We're all busy. But if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or pushed aside, I hope you'll stay with me until the end and consider subscribing. Because what happened after that lunch changed everything. Not just for me, but for an entire company. My name is Merritt. Until that day in the cafeteria, I'd spent 18 months as a market research specialist at a mid-sized tech consulting firm. I joined the company with specialized expertise in emerging markets and genuine enthusiasm for our industry. The first week had been promising. Terrence welcomed me with team introductions and encouraging words about my potential. 15 days later, I watched silently from the back row as he presented my comprehensive market expansion strategy to leadership, without once mentioning my contribution. When I questioned him privately about it afterward, he chuckled. "Consider it part of your orientation," he said, arranging papers on his desk without looking up. "Ideas move upward. Credit stays with management. That's how corporate ladder climbing works." This became my daily reality. My research appeared in his presentations without acknowledgement. My client solutions were attributed to his department leadership. During performance reviews, he cited my insufficient initiative while awarding minimal raises. I wasn't alone. Faye's innovative customer retention program became Terrence's brainchild. Ash's coding solutions were developed under close management guidance. We became a team united by shared resentment, whispering in break rooms, exchanging knowing glances during meetings. I contemplated resignation weekly, updating my resume during lunch breaks, browsing job listings after hours. But the reality of student loans and a struggling economy kept me in place. That and something else, a hardening resolve. The situation deteriorated when our industry hit turbulence. 2 competitors shuttered their doors. Another was acquired and gutted. Whispers of cutbacks spread through our hallways. Terrence began excluding me from critical client meetings, then assigning me the resulting projects without context, setting impossible deadlines. "Missing deadlines reflects poorly during budget reviews," he reminded me, with that same smirk from the cafeteria. One evening, working late to salvage a project I'd been given only partial information about, I spotted Imani in the break room. She stood alone, studying sales projections with concern. "Those metrics tell half the story," I said before wisdom could stop me. She looked up, expression unreadable. "Explain." Instead of retreating, I grabbed a napkin and sketched an alternative framework. "We're measuring what's easy to count, not what actually matters to our sustainability. These 3 factors are more predictive of future performance." To my surprise, she asked thoughtful questions. For 20 minutes, We rethought our approach to market evaluation. As I turned to leave, she asked, "Why haven't these insights reached me before now?" The question cracked open a door. I provided a careful but honest account of information flow within our department. Her expression revealed nothing, but before leaving, she requested a comprehensive analysis, kept strictly between us. For weeks afterward, I maintained parallel work streams, completing Terrence's assigned tasks, while secretly compiling a diagnostic of company operations. I interviewed clients during lunch breaks. I analyzed industry patterns after hours. I identified structural problems and outlined potential solutions. Terrence sensed the shift in my focus. His criticism intensified. The replaceable comment wasn't random. He'd been positioning me for removal for weeks. What he didn't know was that I'd been positioning myself too. The morning after the cafeteria incident, I arrived at the conference room for my meeting with Imani to find Terrence already there, looking self-assured. "Perfect timing," Imani said as I entered. "I was just explaining to Terrence about an extraordinary analysis I received." Terrence nodded confidently. "My department prides itself on thoroughness." Imani opened a folder. "This work identifies 3 fundamental failures within our organization." She slid the document, my analysis, across the table. First, our decision paths are needlessly complex. Second, our compensation doesn't align with contribution. Third, she fixed her gaze on Terrence. "We have patterns of idea appropriation that violate our ethics policy." His smile faltered. "That seems rather subjective. The report includes original submissions, presentation slides, and meeting transcripts showing systematic misattribution," she interrupted. "The evidence spans 18 months and affects multiple employees." What followed stunned even me. Imani outlined a complete company restructuring that eliminated traditional management layers, including Terrence's position. "We're evolving beyond hierarchical thinking," she explained. "We need solution creators, not gatekeepers." Terrence's jaw tightened. "After 8 years of service, you have 2 options," she stated firmly. "Apply for one of the new specialist positions, where performance is transparently measured, or accept separation compensation." He gestured toward me without making eye contact. "And her? Merritt will be developing our innovation division." Terrence's face drained of color. His fingers curled into fists beneath the table. For a moment, I thought he might explode. "I'll need your decision by Friday," Imani concluded, standing to signal the meeting's end. After she left, Terrence remained seated, staring at the wall. I gathered my notes, uncertain what to say or if I should say anything at all. "You planned this," he finally said, voice low. "You went around me." I paused at the door. "I simply did my job thoroughly." "This isn't over," he replied. "People like you don't win against people like me." "That's exactly the problem," I said. "It shouldn't be about winning. It should be about value creation." His laugh was hollow. "Keep believing that fairy tale." I almost walked away then, but turned back. "I'm curious, why did you hire me if you were just going to take credit for my work?" He finally looked at me, expression cold. "Because people with your skills make useful stepping stones." The restructuring announcement went out company-wide that afternoon. Reactions were mixed. Anxiety from those comfortable with traditional hierarchies, excitement from those who'd felt stifled. I received 28 messages within the first hour, most expressing congratulations, some seeking reassurance. Faye burst into my office, closing the door behind her. "Is this real? Tell me this is real." "It's real," I confirmed, and unsettling and exciting and terrifying all at once. "What happens to Terrence?" "He can apply for a specialist position or take severance," she laughed. "Can you imagine him actually doing work instead of just claiming credit for it?" I couldn't answer. Despite everything, watching someone's carefully constructed world collapse brought no joy, but neither did it bring regret. The next week was chaos. Imani appointed me interim transition lead while formal structures were established. Terrence stopped coming to the office, communicating only through terse emails about his decision to accept severance. Other managers reacted differently. Some embraced the change, others resigned, a few fought it. Late Friday, as I was reviewing transition plans, my office phone rang. "You've destroyed everything," Terrence said without introduction. "Years of building this department, all undone by your little power play. This isn't about power, I replied. It's about recognizing contribution. It's about revenge, he snapped. Don't pretend otherwise. After he hung up, I sat in silence, questioning my motives. Was it revenge? Partly, perhaps. But it was also about building something better. A company where ideas flowed freely, where contribution earned recognition, where collaboration replaced competition. 3 months later, our transformed company showed promising results. Teams self-organized around client needs rather than management preferences. Innovation accelerated. Employee satisfaction scores rose dramatically. My innovation division expanded from 3 people to 12. Then came a moment I hadn't anticipated. Ash burst into my office one morning, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," he said, placing it before me. Terrence just announced his new position. The screen showed a professional networking post. Terrence smiling beside the CEO of our largest competitor, announcing his role as their new chief strategy officer. "He's going to use everything he knows about our restructuring against us," Ash warned. I stared at the image, at Terrence's triumphant smile. The competitor had been struggling, but with our internal knowledge, they could potentially leapfrog our innovations. "Should we tell Imani?" Ash asked. Before I could answer, my phone chimed with a message from Terrence himself. "Stepping stones work both ways. See you in the marketplace." That night, I couldn't sleep. The restructuring had been working, teams collaborating effectively, innovative solutions emerging naturally, client satisfaction improving. But Terrence knew our weaknesses, our plans, our client relationships. He'd been in every strategic meeting for years. More troubling was the realization that Terrence's approach, taking credit, positioning others as stepping stones, had indeed advanced his career. He'd failed upward into an executive role at a major competitor. The system I wanted to change had rewarded him again. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Imani. Her assistant scheduled it for 7 a.m. the following day. Never a good sign. "You've seen the announcement," she said when I entered her office. I nodded. "I'm concerned about the competitive implications." "As am I." She gestured toward a chair. "But I'm more concerned about your reaction." "My reaction? Will you let this derail everything we've built?" she asked. "Because that's exactly what he wants." Her directness caught me off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean." "When people like Terrence lose, they want everyone else to lose too. The question is whether you'll give him that satisfaction." I hadn't expected this perspective. "What do you suggest?" She leaned forward. "We accelerate. We innovate faster than he can copy. We build stronger client relationships than he can damage. We create a company so fundamentally different that his old knowledge becomes obsolete. And if we can't, then we failed because we built something fragile, not because Terrence knew our secrets." She smiled slightly, but I don't think that's the case. As I left her office, my phone chimed with another message from Terrence. "First client meeting today. Your former accounts seem very interested in hearing about leadership changes." The taunt was clear. He planned to poach our clients by sowing doubt about our new structure. I started to type a response, then deleted it. Engaging would only validate his approach. Instead, I called an emergency meeting with our client services team. "We need to reach out to every account today, not defensively, but to reinforce the benefits they're already seeing from our restructuring." By noon, we'd contacted half our client list. By end of day, we'd reached them all. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Clients had noticed improved responsiveness, creative solutions, and greater transparency under our new model. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Arnie, our largest client's procurement director. "Interesting lunch today," he said. "Your former colleague made some concerning claims about instability at your company." My heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Arnie chuckled. His approach was so transparently self-serving that it backfired. He kept referring to "my clients" and "my strategies" when discussing work we know came from your team. "What did you tell him?" "That we value partnership over personality, that results speak louder than resumes, and that we're quite happy with our current arrangement." He paused. Though he did make a compelling offer on pricing. The implication was clear. They were satisfied but open to negotiation. I took a deep breath. Arnie, I won't play pricing games. What I will do is invite you to our innovation lab next week. See what we're building, meet the actual creators, and then decide if what we offer brings sufficient value. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. That, he finally said, is exactly why we'll stay with your company. Over the next week, 3 more clients reported similar experiences. Terrence was making aggressive moves, but our transparent approach was resonating more strongly than his promises. Then came the first test of our new model. A potential client, larger than any we'd worked with previously, requested proposals from both our company and Terrence's for a major international project. This is it, Faye said during our planning session. Direct competition. Us versus him. No, I corrected. Not us versus him. Our approach versus theirs. This isn't personal. But despite my words, it felt intensely personal. Terrence had messaged again. Enjoy competing against someone who knows all your tricks. Some things never change. The best strategist still wins. The team worked through weekends to develop our proposal. Rather than the traditional approach, a polished presentation concealing implementation details, we created an open book proposal outlining our thinking process, acknowledging challenges, and demonstrating collaborative problem solving. The presentation day arrived. As we set up in the client's conference room, the door opened and Terrence walked in with his team. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me, then recovered with a broad smile. Merritt, he said loudly, extending his hand. How nice to see you still with the company. I shook his hand briefly. Looking forward to an interesting discussion today. His team presented first, a slick, confident display of market understanding and strategic thinking, much of it eerily familiar to approaches developed in my innovation lab. Terrence frequently referred to my strategic framework and my implementation methodology. When our turn came, I began differently. Before we start, I want to acknowledge something. You'll notice similarities between our approach and what you just heard. That's because these ideas were developed by some of the same people. The difference is who gets to present them today. Terrence's face darkened. I continued, in our company, the people who create the solutions are the ones who share them with you. So today, you won't primarily hear from me. You'll hear directly from the specialists who would serve your account. One by one, our team members presented their components. Faye on customer engagement, Ash on technical implementation, Wyatt on market positioning, Darcy on regulatory compliance. The client team asked challenging questions, which our specialists answered with confidence and candor, occasionally consulting with each other when a question crossed domains. When the client's chief innovation officer asked about risk factors, I didn't intercept the question. Darcy candidly identified 3 potential challenges and outlined our contingency approaches. As we concluded, the CIO leaned forward. I'm curious. Your team openly acknowledged limitations and challenges. Most firms present only certainties. We believe pretending to have all answers creates more risk than acknowledging uncertainty, I replied. We've found transparent collaboration leads to better outcomes than confident directives. The client team exchanged glances. Thank you all. We'll be in touch within the week. Outside the building, Terrence caught up with me in the parking lot. Cute stunt in there, positioning yourselves as the honest underdogs. It wasn't a stunt, I replied, continuing toward my car. He kept pace beside me. You still don't get it, do you? Clients don't want collaboration. They want confidence. They want someone who'll take responsibility. I stopped walking. Taking responsibility isn't the same as taking credit. Semantics, he scoffed. You'll see when they announce their decision. 3 days later, the client called. They'd selected our company for the project, the largest in our history. The deciding factor, they said, was our collaborative approach and transparent acknowledgement of challenges. That afternoon, a company-wide email announced our success. The project would expand our international presence and validate our restructured approach. The celebration spread across departments. As I returned to my office after an impromptu gathering, I found a note on my desk. No name, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Enjoy your moment, but remember, markets change, Clients are fickle, and novelty wears off. The real world rewards strength, not collaboration. We'll revisit this conversation in 6 months. I stared at the note, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that Terrence always managed to trigger. 6 months. A challenge and a threat wrapped into one. I considered shredding it, but instead tucked it into my desk drawer. Sometimes we need reminders of where we've been to appreciate how far we've come. The international project launched the following week. Our collaborative model faced its first major test, coordinating specialists across time zones without traditional management hierarchies. The client assigned Lark, their demanding international director, as our primary contact. Her reputation for exhaustive questioning and skepticism preceded her. During our kickoff video call, she wasted no time addressing her concerns. "Your structure intrigues me," she said, tapping a pen against her notepad. "But I worry about accountability. When problems arise, and they will, who takes responsibility if there's no traditional manager?" "We all do," I explained. "Responsibility is distributed, not delegated. Each specialist owns their component, but we collectively own the outcome." She leaned closer to the camera. "And when your specialists disagree, who breaks the tie?" "The client's best interest breaks the tie," I replied. "We document disagreements, evaluate options against client goals, and proceed with what best serves those goals." Lark's expression remained skeptical. Theoretical responses. "Let's see how it functions under pressure." Pressure came sooner than expected. 2 weeks into the project, a regulatory change in one of our target markets threatened to derail our entire implementation timeline. In the traditional model, Terrence would have made a unilateral decision, likely concealing the full implications from the client until forced to reveal them. Instead, our team collaborated on 3 potential approaches, transparently presented them to Lark with their respective trade-offs, and implemented her selected direction. The problem was solved within days rather than becoming a month-long crisis. After the regulatory hurdle, Lark's skepticism began softening. She started engaging directly with our specialists rather than routing everything through me. The project gained momentum. Weekly metrics showed we were exceeding targets despite the early setback. Then came the email I'd been half expecting, half dreading. A message from Kieran, our client's founder, forwarding correspondence from Terrence. "I thought you should see this. Your competitor seems quite interested in our project." The attached message from Terrence claimed insider knowledge about our implementation difficulties and offered to rescue the project at a reduced fee. He detailed supposed weaknesses in our approach that only someone with internal knowledge could know or convincingly fabricate. I called Kieran immediately. "I apologize for this situation. Our former colleague is—" "No need to explain," Kieran interrupted. "Lark has kept me well informed about your actual progress. I found his email interesting primarily for what it reveals about his character." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you for your understanding. Transparency builds trust, Merritt. Your team has been refreshingly honest about both successes and challenges. That's far more valuable than promises from someone willing to undermine former colleagues." After the call, I forwarded the exchange to Amani with a brief note. "FYI, Terrence actively attempting to poach clients using internal knowledge. Client response attached." Her reply came minutes later. "Not surprised. Our best defense remains consistent delivery, though legal may want to review his employment terms regarding confidentiality." End quote. 3 months into the project, our restructured approach was proving remarkably effective. Innovation happened faster without management bottlenecks. Client satisfaction scores reached unprecedented levels. Team members reported greater job satisfaction despite working harder than before. The media noticed. An industry publication requested an interview about our revolutionary management experiment. The resulting article sparked conversations across our sector about alternative organizational models. The day after publication, I received another message from Terrence. "Enjoying your 15 minutes? Novelty makes for good articles, but poor business models. Our Q2 numbers come out next week. Compare them to yours before celebrating too much." I didn't respond. Our numbers would speak for themselves. And they did. Our quarterly results showed 23% growth compared to their 14%. More telling was employee retention. We'd lost only 2 people since restructuring. while industry sources indicated Terrence's company was experiencing significant turnover. 5 months into our international project, 1 month before Terrence's self-imposed deadline, I received an unexpected visit. Wyatt knocked on my office door, expression unusually serious. "Someone's waiting to see you in the lobby," he said. "Darcy from Terrence's team." Darcy had been Terrence's executive assistant for years, instrumental in his day-to-day operations. We'd never been close, but she'd always treated me with professional courtesy. I found her sitting tensely in our reception area, clutching her handbag. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" she asked, voice low. I led her to a small conference room and closed the door. "What brings you here, Darcy?" She placed her handbag on the table, hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be doing this. If Terrence found out, whatever you share stays between us," I assured her. She took a deep breath. "Terrence has been systematically targeting your clients, not just competing for business, actively working to undermine your relationships. We've noticed," I acknowledged. "It's worse than you think. He's created a dedicated team focused solely on identifying weaknesses in your projects. They're instructed to watch for any implementation hiccups and immediately reach out to those clients with rescue offers." While concerning, this wasn't entirely surprising. "Why are you telling me this?" Darcy's eyes met mine. "Because it's not just business for him. It's personal. In management meetings, he talks about destroying you specifically. He's convinced you deliberately sabotaged his career. I simply provided factual information," I countered. "I know that," she said. "I processed your reports for years. I saw how he took credit for your work." She hesitated. "There's more. He's preparing something big against your international project. I don't know details, but he called it his checkmate move." My mind raced through possibilities. What could he possibly do to derail a successfully progressing project? "Why are you risking your position to tell me this?" I asked. Darcy looked down at her hands. "Last week, my mother needed emergency surgery. I requested 2 days off. Terrence denied it, saying, 'Personal problems can't interfere with business priorities.' I went anyway. When I returned, I found I'd been demoted." Her voice hardened. "He built his career taking credit for others' work. Now he's building his company the same way." After Darcy left, I called an emergency meeting with our international project team. Without revealing my source, I shared that we should prepare for potential disruption. "What kind of disruption?" Faye asked. "Unknown. But knowing Terrence, it will target what he perceives as our greatest vulnerability." Ash leaned forward. "Which is?" I considered this carefully. "Our transparency. He believes it makes us vulnerable because we acknowledge challenges rather than hiding them." "So, we prepare by being even more transparent?" Wyatt sounded skeptical. "Exactly," I replied. "We proactively identify every potential issue, however minor, and share them with the client before Terrence can use them against us." For the next week, our team conducted exhaustive reviews of every project component, documenting potential weaknesses and developing contingency plans. We scheduled a comprehensive update with Lark and Kieran to share our findings. The night before the presentation, I worked late, refining our approach. As I was preparing to leave, my office phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Is this Merritt?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Vima. I'm Chief Legal Counsel at Northstar Partners." My pulse quickened. Northstar was one of the largest investment firms in our sector, known for strategic acquisitions. "I apologize for calling after hours," she continued, "but we've just received some concerning information about your company that requires immediate attention." "What information?" "A detailed dossier suggesting your recent restructuring has created significant legal exposure. It includes internal documents, client communications, and financial projections suggesting imminent instability." Terrence's checkmate move suddenly became clear. He wasn't just targeting our clients. He was attempting to devalue our entire company. "The materials are compelling enough that our acquisition committee has paused consideration of your company," Vima continued. "We were planning to approach with an offer next quarter. I hadn't known we were even on their radar. These materials were provided by a competitor, I assume?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose the source," she replied diplomatically. "But yes, someone with an obvious interest in affecting our perception of your company. I'd like the opportunity to address these concerns directly, I said. The information you've received is from a former manager who was separated during our restructuring. That context is helpful, Vima acknowledged. Are you available to meet tomorrow? Absolutely. After arranging details, I immediately called Imani, explaining the situation. So that's his play, she said thoughtfully. Not attacking the project, but undermining our company valuation. Clever. What's our response? I asked. Complete transparency, as always, she replied. Prepare a full disclosure package, the good, the bad, and the uncertain. Include our contingency plans for various scenarios, and bring Faye with you to the meeting. Her financial analysis will be crucial. The next morning, Faye and I arrived at North Star's impressive downtown offices. Vima greeted us in the lobby, escorting us to a conference room where 4 other executives waited. Their expressions ranged from curious to skeptical. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, I began. Before addressing specific concerns, I'd like to provide context about our company's transformation. For the next hour, Faye and I walked them through our restructuring journey, the challenges, the successes, and most importantly, the data supporting our approach. We directly addressed each concern raised in Terrence's dossier, neither minimizing legitimate issues nor accepting mischaracterizations. When we finished, the room remained silent for several moments. Finally, North Star's acquisition director spoke. This is the most forthright pre-acquisition discussion I've experienced in 20 years. Most companies spend months hiding problems we eventually discover anyway. Hiding problems doesn't solve them, I replied. We prefer focusing energy on solutions rather than concealment. Your competitor painted quite a different picture, Vima noted. I imagine he did, I acknowledged. He represents a traditional management approach that values hierarchy over contribution. We've chosen a different path. The acquisition director nodded slowly. We'll need time to reconsider our position, but I appreciate your candor today. As we left the building, Faye grabbed my arm excitedly. Did you catch that? Reconsider our position. They're still interested. Maybe, I cautioned, but that wasn't our primary goal. We needed to neutralize Terrence's attack, not secure an acquisition. Still, Faye insisted. It's a powerful validation of our approach. She was right. Even without an acquisition offer, having North Star's interest confirmed our model's viability. It wasn't just working, it was attracting serious attention. That afternoon, we presented our comprehensive risk assessment to Lark and Kieran. Their response exceeded expectations. This level of proactive disclosure is unprecedented, Kieran said. Most firms only reveal problems after they've become crises. Precisely why we chose your company, Lark added, her earlier skepticism completely gone. This approach significantly reduces our overall project risk. By day's end, not only had we neutralized Terrence's potential disruption, we'd strengthened both client relationships and acquisition interest. I returned to my office feeling cautiously optimistic. A notification chimed on my computer. An email from Terrence, sent just minutes ago. Heard you had an interesting meeting today. Don't celebrate yet. You've survived the opening moves, but the game continues. 6-month deadline still stands. I closed the email without responding. His chess metaphors were growing tiresome. This wasn't a game with artificial rules and boundaries. This was about creating sustainable value versus extracting personal gain. The following week brought unexpected news. North Star Partners announced a major investment in our company. Not a full acquisition, but a strategic partnership that would accelerate our international expansion. The press release specifically cited our innovative organizational model as a key factor in their decision. Hours after the announcement, I received a text message from an unknown number. This changes nothing. But it had changed everything. North Star's investment validated our approach industry-wide. Our stock price jumped. Potential clients reached out, intrigued by our restructured model. The very thing Terrence had attempted to undermine had become our greatest market differentiator. Exactly 6 months after his note, I received a meeting request from a competitor. Not Terrence's company, but another major player in our industry. Curious, I accepted. Their CEO, Eliza, came directly to the point. We're interested in acquiring your innovative division. We're not looking to sell, I replied. Everyone has a price, she countered. And frankly, we're concerned about your competitive impact if we don't bring you into our fold. Meaning you'd rather acquire our approach than compete against it. She smiled thinly. Precisely. Innovation is valuable. Disruptive innovation is priceless. I appreciate your interest, I said, but we're committed to our independence. As she was leaving, Eliza paused. I should mention, we're also in talks with Terrence's company about a potential merger. He suggested your division might be more acquisition-friendly than you're indicating. The implications were clear. Terrence was positioning himself for a potential takeover of our division through a third-party merger. If successful, he would effectively become my boss again. I reported the conversation to Imani immediately. This confirms our market impact, she noted. When competitors try to acquire you, you're doing something right. She leaned back in her chair. But Terrence's involvement complicates things. He's still trying to undermine us, I agreed, just through increasingly sophisticated means. Imani studied me thoughtfully. After everything that's happened, I'm curious. What do you want the end result to be with Terrence? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on defending against his attacks that I hadn't considered my ultimate goal. I want him to stop interfering with our business, I began. I want our model to succeed despite his efforts to undermine it. I paused, considering more deeply. But what I really want is vindication. Not just personal vindication, but validation that our approach creates more value than his extractive model. Imani nodded. Then perhaps it's time we stop playing defense. What do you mean? For months, we've been reacting to Terrence's moves. Maybe it's time we made our own. She smiled. Your revenge shouldn't be about destroying Terrence. It should be about building something so successful that his approach becomes obsolete. The idea resonated deeply. True vindication wouldn't come from Terrence's failure, but from our success becoming undeniable, even to him. Over the next weeks, we accelerated our innovation initiatives while monitoring merger discussions between Terrence's company and Eliza's. Our international project neared successful completion. Client testimonials poured in, validating our collaborative approach. Our stock continued climbing while our competition struggled with retention issues. Then came news that changed the landscape entirely. Terrence's company announced a merger with Eliza's, a move that would create the largest firm in our sector. Market analysts praised the combined entity's potential to dominate the industry. Terrence's message arrived minutes after the announcement. Checkmate. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had he won after all? The merged company would have resources and market position we couldn't match. Perhaps the traditional model would prevail simply through consolidation and market power. I was still processing this when Imani called an emergency leadership meeting. Her expression was uncharacteristically animated as we gathered. The merger announcement changes everything, she began. They'll be formidable competitors, Faye acknowledged. That's not what I mean, Imani replied. Look deeper at the announcement details. Terrence isn't taking the CEO position. He's being named Chief Strategy Officer. Eliza remains CEO. So? Ash asked. So the power dynamics are clear, Imani explained. Eliza acquired his company, not the other way around. She's the decision maker. I began to see her direction, and Eliza approached us first. Exactly, Imani smiled. She values our innovation model. Now she's acquired a company with traditional hierarchy. The cultures will inevitably clash, creating an opportunity, I continued, for us to demonstrate which model produces better results. Precisely. Imani distributed folders to each of us. This is our response to the merger. Review it tonight. We implement tomorrow. Inside my folder was a comprehensive plan titled Open Innovation Initiative. Rather than competing directly against the newly merged giant, we would transform into a completely open organization, sharing our methods, publishing our results, and inviting industry participation in collaborative projects. The approach was counterintuitive yet brilliant. Instead of fighting for market share, we would become the industry's innovation engine. Our competitors could either adopt our collaborative methods or risk falling behind as the market evolved around them. The plan included a dramatic announcement. We would open source our organizational model, providing detailed implementation guides for any company wanting to restructure. We would offer transition consulting to help traditional companies evolve. We would create an industry consortium dedicated to collaborative innovation. As I read further, I understood the genius of Imani's strategy. By open sourcing our approach, we would accelerate industry transformation toward the very model Terrence had fought against. His merger victory would become hollow as the market itself evolved beyond his traditional paradigm. This wasn't just about our company versus his anymore. This was about reshaping an entire industry. The next morning, I found a package on my desk, a small wooden box containing a chess piece, a white queen with a note attached. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't capturing your opponent's pieces, but changing the nature of the game. Imani. I placed the queen on my desk as we finalized our announcement. By afternoon, our Open Innovation Initiative hit the newswires. The market response was immediate and overwhelming. Our stock jumped 28% by closing bell. Industry publications scrambled for interviews. Competing companies, including smaller firms threatened by the merger, reached out about joining our consortium. But the response I awaited most came the following day, a message request from an unknown profile on a professional networking site. I accepted, revealing a direct message from Terrence. "What exactly do you think you're accomplishing with this publicity stunt?" For the first time in our long conflict, I felt no anxiety reading his words, only clarity. I replied, "Creating an industry where everyone can contribute their best work and be recognized for it, where ideas flow freely instead of being captured for personal advancement, where collaboration creates more value than competition." His response came quickly. "Idealistic nonsense. Business isn't about making everyone feel valued. It's about results." "I agree completely about results," I wrote back, "which is why our next announcement might interest you." "What announcement?" I didn't reply. He would find out with everyone else tomorrow. That night, I could barely sleep, anticipating what was coming. Our plan's next phase was the boldest yet, and the one most likely to finally break Terrence's certainty about his approach. Morning arrived with a flurry of preparation. At precisely 9 a.m., Imani stepped onto the stage at our hastily arranged press conference. Camera flashes punctuated her opening remarks about industry transformation and collaborative potential. Then she revealed our bombshell. "Today, we're announcing the Transparent Performance Initiative. Beginning next quarter, we will publicly publish side-by-side comparisons of project outcomes under traditional management versus collaborative models. We've already secured participation from 12 companies across the industry spectrum." Reporters erupted with questions. Imani held up her hand for silence. "But the most significant participant," she continued, "confirmed just this morning. Eliza Nowen, CEO of the newly merged Pinnacle Astral Group, has committed their organization to this transparent comparison." The room exploded with activity. This was unprecedented, a direct, public performance comparison between competing organizational models. I watched from offstage, imagining Terrence's reaction. Eliza had committed his company without consulting him, a clear indication of the actual power dynamics in their merger. His traditional approach would now be measured directly against our collaborative model, with results published for the entire industry to see. As the press conference concluded, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Terrence. I stepped into a quiet corner before answering. "Hello, Terrence. What have you done?" His voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "Eliza had no right to commit us to this ridiculous comparison." "Actually, as CEO, she has every right," I replied calmly. "That's how traditional hierarchy works, isn't it? Decisions flow from the top. This is about revenge," he hissed. "You've manipulated this entire situation." "No, Terrence. This is about accountability and transparency. Two things you've spent your career avoiding." The line went silent for several seconds. "You think you've won," he finally said, "but you're forgetting something crucial. I know how to work within a hierarchical system. I know how to ensure my division outperforms yours, regardless of your fancy collaborative approach." "That's exactly the point," I replied. "If your traditional model genuinely produces better results, you should welcome this comparison. Unless," I paused, "unless you're not actually confident in your approach." "This conversation is over," he snapped. "I'll see you in the performance rankings." The line went dead. I pocketed my phone, feeling neither triumph nor anxiety, only certainty that the real test was finally beginning. 6 weeks after the announcement, implementation teams from both companies met to establish measurement protocols. Terrence attended, uncharacteristically subdued. The merger was clearly proving more challenging than anticipated, with reports of significant internal conflicts between the combining cultures. As the meeting concluded, Terrence approached me. "This little experiment won't prove what you think it will. It's not about proving anything," I replied. "It's about learning what actually works best." He laughed hollowly. "Still clinging to your idealism." He lowered his voice. "But know this, I haven't forgotten who started this conflict. Your transparency crusade destroyed my career trajectory. Whatever happens with this comparison, that debt remains unpaid." As he walked away, I realized something important. Despite everything, Terrence still viewed our situation through the lens of personal competition rather than organizational effectiveness. He couldn't separate his ego from his business approach. And that, I suddenly understood, was his fundamental weakness. The first quarterly comparison results were scheduled for release in exactly 1 month. Both companies were implementing similar projects for different clients, with agreed-upon metrics for evaluation. The industry waited with collective breath held. In the meantime, our Open Innovation Initiative gained momentum. 23 companies had joined our consortium. Our training programs for collaborative restructuring had waiting lists. The industry was evolving rapidly, with or without Terrence's participation. 1 week before the results announcement, I received an unexpected visitor. Eliza requested a private meeting, arriving at our offices late evening after most staff had departed. "I'll be direct," she said once we were seated in my office. "The comparison results are troubling for our traditional divisions." I waited silently. "Terrence's department is significantly underperforming compared to your collaborative teams," she continued. "Client satisfaction, innovation metrics, implementation timelines, all favor your approach." "That aligns with our experience," I acknowledged. "The problem," she sighed, "is that Terrence is attempting to manipulate the results. He's pressuring project managers to adjust timelines, revise client feedback, and modify resource allocations retroactively." This wasn't entirely surprising, but her willingness to disclose it was. "Why are you telling me this?" Eliza leaned forward. "Because I didn't merge with his company to preserve an outdated management model. I did it to acquire market share while transitioning to a more effective approach. Your approach. And Terrence is resisting that transition." "Vehemently," she confirmed. "He views it as personal vindication or failure rather than organizational evolution." I considered the implications. "What do you need from me?" "Partnership," she replied. "Not competition. I want our company to evolve toward your collaborative model with your consortium's guidance. But first, I need to address the Terrence situation." "How can I help?" She smiled slightly. "By doing nothing. Let the unmodified comparison results publish as scheduled. The data speaks for itself." After she left, I sat alone in my office, contemplating the conversation. Terrence's resistance to change wasn't just about me anymore. It was becoming a liability to his own company. His focus on winning our personal battle was causing him to lose the larger war. The morning the comparison results were scheduled for release, I arrived early to find an urgent message from Darcy. "Emergency at Terrence's office. Come quickly if you can. Back entrance." Concerned and curious, I drove to their headquarters. Darcy met me at a service door, expression tense. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, leading me through back corridors. Terrence had a complete meltdown when he saw the final comparison report. "He's been here all night trying to revise the numbers." "Why did you call me?" She stopped outside a conference room door. "Because what's happening in there needs a witness besides me." Through the door's window, I could see Terrence facing Eliza and 2 board members. His face was flushed, hands gesticulating wildly. Eliza's expression remained impassive. Darcy handed me an earpiece connected to the room's audio system. "Security monitoring," she explained. "I have access codes from managing Terrence's meetings." I hesitated, uncomfortable with eavesdropping, but Darcy's expression was urgent. Please. This affects more than just Terrence. I inserted the earpiece, catching Terrence mid-sentence. Deliberately sabotaged by collaborative teams. These results are meaningless without context. Eliza's voice was calm. The methodology was agreed upon by both companies. The metrics were established collaboratively. Every project had independent verification. It's too soon for meaningful comparison, Terrence insisted. Traditional approaches show their value over longer time frames. That wasn't your position when we agreed to the comparison, one board member noted. And it contradicts your own previous claims about quick wins from hierarchical efficiency, added the other. Terrence's voice lowered. This is a personal vendetta. Merit has manipulated this entire situation to discredit me. This isn't about merit. Eliza replied firmly. This is about organizational effectiveness. The data is clear. Collaborative teams are outperforming traditional hierarchies across every meaningful metric. Give me 6 more months, Terrence pleaded. I can turn these numbers around. We're not suppressing the report, Terrence, Eliza stated. The industry is watching. Transparency was the point of this initiative. His voice hardened. Then you leave me no choice. I'll release my own analysis showing the methodological flaws. That would violate your employment agreement, one board member warned. I don't care, Terrence shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I won't let her win. The room fell silent. Her? Eliza finally asked. This is about beating merit, not about what's best for our company or clients. Terrence seemed to realize his mistake. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant, Eliza interrupted, and it clarifies several decisions you've made recently. She exchanged glances with the board members, who nodded slightly. Terrence, we're releasing the comparison report as scheduled, and effective immediately, we're restructuring your division. What does that mean? His voice had lost its force. It means your position as Chief Strategy Officer no longer exists. We're implementing collaborative teams across all divisions, including yours. You can't do this, he whispered. Actually, I can, Eliza replied. The board unanimously approved the restructuring last night after reviewing the comparison data. I removed the earpiece, having heard enough. Through the window, I could see Terrence slumped in his chair, defeat evident in every line of his body. Darcy touched my arm. We should go before he comes out. As we hurried toward the exit, I asked, why did you want me to witness that? She stopped at the door. Because you needed to see it wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about creating something better. She smiled slightly. You changed an industry by focusing on creation rather than competition. He destroyed his career by doing the opposite. I nodded, understanding completely. Thank you, Darcy. No, she replied. Thank you for showing there's a better way to work. The comparison report published that afternoon, sending shockwaves through the industry. Collaborative teams had outperformed traditional hierarchies by significant margins across all key metrics. More significantly, employee satisfaction and retention rates were dramatically higher in collaborative environments. That evening, as our team celebrated the validation of our approach, I received one final message from Terrence. Congratulations, you won. But remember, businesses are fickle. Today's innovation is tomorrow's outdated approach. This isn't over. For the first time, I felt only compassion reading his words. He still didn't understand. This had never been about winning or losing. It had never been about him versus me. It had been about creating a better way to work, one that recognized contribution, fostered innovation, and valued people as creators rather than resources. My revenge wasn't destroying Terrence. It was building something better than what he represented, something that made his approach obsolete not through competition, but through evolution. I typed a final reply. You're right about one thing. It's not over. But that's because transformation never ends. There's always something better to build. I hope you find a way to be part of it rather than fighting against it. 6 months later, our collaborative model had become the industry standard. Our consortium had grown to include 67 companies. Terrence had disappeared from the professional landscape, declining interview requests and maintaining no public presence. Until the day I received an unexpected email. Coffee? I have a proposition to discuss. Terrence. Curiosity won over caution. I agreed to meet Terrence at a quiet cafe downtown. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the expensive watch, the tailored suit, the practiced confidence. Instead, he wore casual clothes, his posture more subdued. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "Curiosity is a powerful motivator," I replied. "What proposition could possibly interest me after everything that's happened?" He took a deep breath. "I want to join your consortium." I carefully set down my coffee cup. "You want to join the collaborative model you've spent years fighting against?" "Not as a company," he clarified. "Personally, as a consultant." "Why would we consider that?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "Because I understand the traditional model better than anyone. I know exactly where the resistance points are, what fears drive opposition to change." He leaned forward. "I could help companies transition more effectively." I studied his face, searching for signs of deception. "This is quite a transformation." His eyes dropped to the table. "After losing my position, I did some consulting work, traditional stuff, but clients kept asking about implementing collaborative models. They'd seen the comparison results." He smiled wryly. "I found myself studying your approach just to remain relevant. And I realized something unexpected. The collaborative model isn't just more effective, it's more sustainable. It creates healthier workplaces." He met my gaze directly. "I've spent 20 years climbing hierarchies by pushing others down. I'm tired. And I'm good at exactly one thing: understanding organizational dynamics." I remained silent, processing his words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I'm asking for an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to something better than what I helped create. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," he admitted. "Not yet, but you believe in giving people chances to prove their value. That's the foundation of your entire model." I considered his request carefully. The idea was either brilliant or disastrous. Terrence's intimate knowledge of traditional hierarchies could indeed be valuable for companies transitioning to collaborative structures, but his history made trust impossible. "Here's what I can offer," I finally said. "A 3-month probationary contract. You'll work with one transitioning company under phased direct supervision. No client contact without her present. Complete transparency on all communications." "Agreed," he said immediately. "And one more condition," I added. "You'll publicly document your experience. The challenges, the revelations, the mistakes, everything." His expression tightened. "You want me to publicly admit I was wrong?" "No," I corrected. "I want you to publicly share your learning journey. There's a difference." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "That's fair." As we concluded our meeting, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "What made you do it? Expose me? Change the company? Transform an industry? Was it really just about creating something better? Or was revenge part of it?" I looked at him directly. "It started with wanting justice, perhaps even revenge, but it evolved into something more important. I realized destroying you wouldn't fix the real problem. The problem was a system that rewarded taking credit over creating value." "And now?" he asked. "Now I understand my true revenge wasn't ruining your career. It was building something so fundamentally better that your approach became obsolete. I didn't need to destroy you. The market did that when given a clear choice between our models." His expression showed genuine understanding for perhaps the first time. "That's elegant. It's also more satisfying," I added, gathering my things, "because it doesn't just affect you. It helps everyone else." 6 months later, Terrence's probationary contract evolved into a permanent position. His insights proved valuable for companies struggling with transition. The public documentation of his journey became a case study in organizational transformation. The industry continued evolving. Our collaborative model expanded beyond our sector into adjacent industries. The fundamental nature of work was changing. Not everywhere, not completely, but significantly and irreversibly. My greatest revenge wasn't taking Terrence's job or destroying his career. It was creating a world where his old approach couldn't succeed and mine couldn't fail. A world where contribution matters more than position, where value creation trumps value extraction, where collaboration defeats competition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making someone lose. It's about changing the very definition of winning. If you've stayed with me until the end of this story, you know it's about more than workplace drama. It's about creating better systems instead of just navigating broken ones. I hope it inspires you to look at your own challenges differently. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about transformation and justice in unexpected forms. Because sometimes the most powerful change comes not from fighting what you hate, but from building what you believe in. The crystal glasses caught the soft light of the restaurant chandelier as Dmitri, our owner, lifted his flute. To Petra, our new head chef, your passion for innovative cuisine has transformed this restaurant. Everyone raised their glasses in unison. Everyone except Renata, our executive chef, my boss. Her lips formed a tight smile that never reached her eyes as she gripped her champagne so hard, I thought the stem might snap. I accepted the toast with grace, turning to shake hands with Wesley, the food critic whose glowing review of my winter tasting menu had cemented my reputation in the culinary scene. The celebration felt surreal after 3 years of 16-hour days, burns, cuts, and relentless pressure. Your duck confit with cherry reduction was poetry, Wesley gushed. I've never tasted anything quite like it. Tasted. I smiled, about to respond when something reflected in the polished silver serving tray caught my attention. Renata's silhouette hovered over the bar where my special celebratory cocktail, custom creation the bartender had made just for me, sat waiting. Her hand moved swiftly, dropping something between her fingers that dissolved instantly into the ruby-colored liquid. My heart stuttered. Had I imagined it? But then she glanced around furtively, satisfaction flashing across her face as she stepped away. You should try your signature drink, she said, suddenly appearing at my side. Everyone's waiting. Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were calculating. After all, not everyone gets so lucky in this business. She leaned closer, her whisper hot against my ear. You're just lucky, she hissed. This promotion should have gone to someone with actual talent. Ice crawled down my spine, but years in high-pressure kitchens had taught me to keep my expression neutral. My mind raced. I couldn't accuse her outright, not without proof, not with everyone watching, not against the executive chef who'd been here for 8 years while I was the newcomer. Renata stepped back, watching expectantly as I approached my cocktail. The room quieted, all eyes on me as I was meant to take the ceremonial first sip of my celebration drink. I could see triumph flicker in Renata's eyes as she waited for me to consume whatever she'd prepared. I lifted the glass, noting the undissolved granules still settling at the bottom. My mind flashed to the countless cooking shows we'd watched during slow afternoons in the kitchen, including one about forensic toxicology in the food industry. The clarity that washed over me was sudden and cold. Actually, I announced, wearing my brightest smile, our wonderful HR director deserves the first toast. I turned to Camille, who stood chatting with the sous chefs. She fought for fair advancement opportunities in our kitchen. This celebration wouldn't be happening without her. Camille beamed, clearly surprised by the recognition. She stepped forward and accepted the glass with pleasure. Oh, that's so thoughtful, Petra. My eyes flicked to Renata. The color drained from her face as her intended target sipped what was meant for me. Delicious, Camille declared, taking another generous sip. I watched Renata's hands tremble slightly as she excused herself to the restroom. I tried to focus on the conversations around me, but my mind was spinning. Had I imagined it all? Was I being paranoid? 15 minutes later, I had my answer. Camille's speech became slurred. She stumbled against a waiter, nearly toppling a tray of appetizers. Are you all right? I asked, gripping her elbow to steady her. I feel strange. Her words blurred together. Only had one drink. When she collapsed, panic erupted across the restaurant. Someone called for an ambulance, while Dmitri loosened her collar, checking her breathing. She only had one drink, people murmured in confusion. How could this happen? Renata reappeared, her face a mask of concern. But when our eyes met across the room, I saw something cold and calculating behind her practiced sympathy. I knew then, this wasn't over. It had only just begun. If you're feeling that chill down your spine already, make sure to hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. Drop a comment about what you think will happen next. I love reading your theories. My name is Petra Nichols, and until that night, I'd believed that pure talent and hard work were enough to succeed in the cutthroat culinary world. I was 32, graduated top of my class from culinary school, and had spent years honing my craft in kitchens across the country before landing at Lumiere, an upscale restaurant known for blending classic techniques with modern innovations. I grew up in a small town where my grandmother taught me to cook using ingredients from her garden. While other kids played video games, I experimented with flavors and textures. My parents died in a car accident when I was 14, leaving me to be raised by my grandmother. When she passed away during my second year of culinary school, cooking became more than a passion. It was my connection to the people I'd loved and lost. I'm not particularly tall or imposing. With unruly copper hair I keep tied back in the kitchen and hazel eyes that people tell me change color depending on my mood. What I lack in physical presence, I make up for in intensity and precision. My hands bear the marks of my profession, small burns and scars that tell the story of my journey. 3 years ago, I joined Lumiere, excited to work under Renata Klein, whose reputation as an innovative chef had attracted me to the restaurant. She was 45, with stark gray-streaked black hair always pulled into a severe bun and a commanding presence that made even veteran chefs straighten their posture when she entered the kitchen. Initially, Renata seemed supportive. She praised my technique and occasionally allowed me to contribute special dishes to the daily menu. The other staff warned me not to get comfortable with her approval. Renata doesn't share the spotlight. Tomas, a sous chef who had worked at Lumiere for 5 years, told me during my first month. The last promising chef who got too much attention disappeared faster than a soufflé in an open refrigerator. I didn't take his warning seriously until my seasonal tasting menu caught Dimitri's attention. The owner was a tall, bearded man with kind eyes that contrasted with his intimidating build. His family had been in the restaurant business for generations, and his opinion carried weight not just in our kitchen but throughout the city's culinary scene. This spring, vegetable composition with the fermented garlic foam, it's revolutionary, Dimitri had said, his accent thickening with enthusiasm. Who created this? Renata had frozen mid-step, her knife pausing over the fish she was filleting. It's a collaborative effort, she began, but Dimitri waved her off. No. This has a distinct perspective. Who specifically designed this dish? All eyes turned to me as I raised my hand slightly. I developed it based on techniques I studied in Japan last year. The next day, my dish was featured in a local magazine, with a small photograph of me quoted as Lumiere's rising star chef. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, my station was always missing ingredients when service began. Preparations I'd completed the night before would mysteriously be oversalted or overcooked by the time I arrived in the morning. Recipe modifications I suggested would be dismissed in staff meetings, only to appear on the menu weeks later, credited as executive chef's inspiration. When customers or critics specifically requested my dishes or asked to compliment the chef, Renata intercepted these moments, claiming credit with practiced humility. Yes, I've been developing that technique for years, she would say, while shooting me warning glances from across the kitchen. I confronted her once, after discovering she had replaced my signature sauce with an inferior version right before an important service. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice low as staff bustled around us. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." Renata's eyes narrowed. "Listen carefully, Petra. Kitchens have hierarchies for a reason. You haven't earned your place yet. You're riding on beginner's luck and borrowed ideas. My ideas are original." "Your ideas," she cut me off, "are unrefined concepts that require a master's touch to become worthy of this restaurant. Remember your place." Despite the sabotage, my dishes continued receiving praise. Customers began asking specifically for the menu items created by that red-headed chef. Food critics noted the distinctive handprint of a new talent emerging at Lumiere. The week before my promotion announcement, Renata made her boldest move yet. Dimitri had scheduled a special tasting for potential investors, and I was responsible for 3 of the 7 courses. The morning of the event, I discovered all my labeled ingredients had been switched or tampered with. Anticipating something like this, I had prepared duplicate components and stored them at Tomas's apartment the night before. I retrieved them with barely enough time to prepare my courses. The investors were impressed, particularly with my innovative approach to traditional techniques. The following day, Dmitri called me into his office and offered me the position of head chef for the main dining room. Renata would remain executive chef, overseeing the entire culinary operation, but I would have creative control over the main dining room menu. "You've proven yourself through adversity," Dmitri said, his expression suggesting he understood more than he let on about the kitchen dynamics. "That's the mark of a true chef," which brings us back to my promotion party and the drugged cocktail meant for me. In the aftermath of the incident, Camille was rushed to the hospital. The doctors pumped her stomach and kept her overnight for observation. She recovered fully by the next day, but remembered nothing after her first sip of the cocktail. The restaurant buzzed with whispers. Without clear proof of tampering, speculation ran wild. That's when Renata launched her counterattack. "Perhaps Petra was responsible," she suggested to Dmitri when she thought I couldn't hear. "She's been unstable under pressure lately, resentful that she didn't receive complete control of the kitchen." She leaned closer to him. "I've been covering for her mistakes for years. Ask anyone. She's been increasingly erratic since getting recognition. Without evidence, it became her word against mine. Renata had 8 years of trust built with the staff. I had only 3. The incident was eventually attributed to an unknown food sensitivity combined with alcohol, though I noticed Camille never accepted drinks at work events after that. Meanwhile, my kitchen life became increasingly unbearable. Renata assigned me the worst preparation stations with poor ventilation and limited counter space. She scheduled me for conflicting events, then documented my unreliability when I couldn't be in 2 places at once. Staff who had once celebrated my promotion now questioned my character, wondering if the rumors about my instability were true. Orders I sent to the dining room were returned with complaints that hadn't existed before. I began checking each plate meticulously before it left my station, often finding additional seasonings or ingredients that would ruin the dish's balance. "You should consider stepping down," Renata suggested 3 weeks after the party, "for health reasons, before things get worse for you." The threat hung in the air between us, clear as the blade of her expensive chef's knife. I considered quitting. My reputation was being systematically destroyed, and the joy I once found in cooking was evaporating under the constant strain of watching my back. But quitting meant Renata won. It meant abandoning the position I'd earned through years of dedication. It meant giving up the last connection to the passion my grandmother had instilled in me. So instead, I watched and learned Renata's patterns. She became careless when angry, and nothing angered her more than Wesley, the food critic whose glowing reviews had helped secure my promotion. He was notoriously demanding, sending back dishes that didn't meet his exacting standards, and he was scheduled to visit again in 1 month for a feature on innovative female chefs in the city. For weeks, I observed Renata's habits. She kept a personal notebook where she sketched modified versions of my signature dishes, planning to gradually replace my menu with her imitations. She believed no one could decipher her shorthand, but after years of reading her hastily scrawled instructions, I understood enough to recognize what she was doing. I also noticed something disturbing. She had begun researching food allergies and sensitivities, particularly Wesley's well-documented intolerance to certain mushroom varieties and truffles. This information was always included in his reservation notes, along with strict instructions that these ingredients must not even touch the plates of his accompanying guests due to severe reactions. One evening, as I was leaving the restaurant, I overheard Renata on the phone in her office. The door was slightly ajar, and her words drifted into the hallway. "Yes, I understand the risk," she was saying, "but it would only be trace amounts, enough to cause discomfort, not danger. It would discredit the new menu completely." My blood ran cold. Was she planning to deliberately trigger Wesley's allergies during his upcoming visit and blame it on my menu? I needed to be certain before making any accusations. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual and found Renata's notebook temporarily unattended while she spoke with a delivery person. I quickly photographed several pages with my phone before returning it exactly as I'd found it. Later, reviewing the images, my suspicions were confirmed. She had noted Wesley's allergies with a small star and the words, "perfect opportunity" beside them. Beneath that was a modified recipe for my signature truffle-adjacent sauce that called for actual truffle oil, MSE, labeled special ingredient for W. My opportunity came during preparation for Wesley's upcoming visit. Renata had insisted on handling the critics' table personally, claiming her experience was needed for such an important review. The feature on female chefs will focus primarily on me, of course, she told the staff during our planning meeting. As the executive chef, I'll be showcasing my interpretation of modern cuisine. I noticed the pointed glance she threw my way. Petra will handle the secondary tables, she continued. We need to make sure the regular guests don't feel neglected while we focus on our special visitor. The other chefs exchanged uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew Wesley was coming specifically to taste my new menu creations after his previous review. While organizing the special menu later that day, I watched Renata make notes in her book. She believed no one could see what she was writing, but the large mirror above the prep station gave me a clear reflection. She was planning something dangerous. Her notes showed she was incorporating traces of truffle oil into dishes meant for Wesley's table. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't just professional sabotage anymore. This was deliberately endangering someone's health. Wesley's allergy was severe enough that even small amounts could send him to the hospital. And if that happened, the blame would fall on me, the head chef whose menu had accidentally poisoned a prominent food critic. I needed to act carefully. Direct accusations without proof would backfire spectacularly. Renata had already planted seeds of doubt about my stability among the staff. I needed irrefutable evidence and witnesses. The day before Wesley's visit, Renata confronted me in the walk-in refrigerator while I was selecting produce for the next day's preparations. The heavy door swung shut behind her, leaving us alone among shelves of ingredients. I'll be preparing the critic's main course, she announced with poorly hidden satisfaction. Dimitri feels your recent dishes have been disappointing. I kept my expression neutral. That's surprising. The customer feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Renata's smile tightened. Customers don't always understand cuisine at the highest level. The owner has concerns about consistency. He's worried your emotional state might affect the quality. The implication hung in the cold air between us. She'd been systematically undermining my authority and reputation. And it was working. I nodded, feigning disappointment. I understand, I said quietly. I'll still help with prep. I could learn from watching your approach. Something like suspicion flickered in her eyes, but the deferential tone seemed to satisfy her ego. She agreed, likely wanting to witness my humiliation when the critic praised her food over mine. That's the right attitude, she said. Know your place, and perhaps you'll survive in this industry. As she turned to leave, I noticed a small vial peeking out of her pocket, unlabeled, filled with amber liquid that I suspected was pure truffle essence. My suspicions were confirmed, and terror gripped me. She wasn't just planning to include traces of truffle. She was going to ensure a severe reaction. I spent that night sleepless, weighing my options. By morning, I had a plan. On the night of Wesley's visit, I arrived 2 hours early to prepare stations. The kitchen was empty except for the dishwashers setting up for the evening service. I carefully checked every ingredient, making notes of exactly what was where. When Renata arrived later, she barely acknowledged me as the kitchen bustled with pre-service activity. The other chefs worked diligently, tension evident in their rigid movements. Everyone knew tonight's review could make or break our restaurant's reputation. The critic just arrived, Tomas announced, returning from peeking into the dining room. He's brought an assistant and the photographer from the magazine. Renata straightened her chef's coat, shooting me a triumphant look. Petra, handle the other tables. I'll take care of Wesley personally. I nodded, keeping my head down as I continued preparing the components for my station. But I wasn't as submissive as I appeared. Earlier, I'd spoken with Camille from HR, sharing my concerns without making direct accusations. I'd also had a brief conversation with Dimitri, mentioning the unusual change in protocol for handling the critics' table. Just a precaution, I'd told him. Given Wesley's allergies, I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the safety protocols. As service began, I executed each dish flawlessly, earning appreciative nods from the waitstaff. Meanwhile, I kept one eye on Renata as she personally prepared Wesley's courses. The moment came during the preparation of the main dish, a duck breast with seasonal vegetables and a special sauce that was a modified version of my signature creation. As Renata began assembling the critic's special dish, I noticed Dimitri observing from the kitchen doorway, exactly as I'd hoped. Renata reached into her pocket and removed the small vial I'd spotted earlier. With practiced sleight of hand, she began to add drops to the sauce. "Chef Renata," I called out, just loud enough to be heard over the kitchen noise. "I think the owner has a question about the presentation." Renata's head snapped up, and she saw Dimitri watching intently. She tried to casually pocket the vial, but in her haste, it slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Dimitri stepped forward. "What are you adding to that plate?" he asked sharply. Renata startled. "Just the finishing touches. That looks like truffle oil," said Dimitri, moving closer to examine the fallen vial. Wesley specifically mentioned his severe truffle allergy when he made the reservation. "It's in all our notes." The kitchen fell silent. Line cooks paused mid-task, witnessing the confrontation. "It's not," Renata began, but Dimitri had already picked up the vial and unscrewed the cap, wafting the scent toward his nose. "This is concentrated truffle oil," he confirmed, his face darkening. "What is this doing anywhere near the critic's food?" Renata's eyes darted around the kitchen, landing on me with sudden fury. "Petra must have placed it there. She's been sabotaging the kitchen for weeks." The accusation hung in the air, but it lacked conviction. Too many eyes had seen her take the vial from her own pocket. "That's a serious accusation," Dimitri said coldly. "One that requires evidence." What Renata didn't realize was that I hadn't needed to create false evidence or elaborate traps. I had simply ensured the owner was present at the exact moment she implemented her sabotage. The owner continued, "We've also received concerning information about what happened at the promotion party. The bartender came forward this morning. My heart skipped. This was news even to me." The HR director stepped into the kitchen, holding a tablet. Arlo, our head bartender, noticed something unusual that night but was afraid to speak up given Renata's position. After recent events, he reviewed the security footage. She turned the tablet around, showing crystal clear footage of Renata dropping something into my cocktail at the party. Renata's face contorted with rage. "That proves nothing. It could have been anything. A garnish, a flavor enhancer." "I had medical tests done after my food sensitivity incident," Camille stated firmly. "The results showed sedatives in my system, the same kind used to calm anxious pets, like your cat that you're always talking about." Renata's face drained of all color. "You can't prove that came from me." "Perhaps not conclusively," Dimitri admitted, "but attempting to poison a food critic? That I saw with my own eyes." He turned to the sous chef. "Tomas, please escort Renata to my office and call the police." "This is absurd," Renata shouted as Tomas approached her. "She's manipulating all of you. She's been planning this." As Tomas led her away, her eyes locked onto mine with pure hatred. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No kitchen in this city will hire you after I'm done telling them what you're really like." The door swung shut behind them, leaving the kitchen in stunned silence. Dimitri turned to me. "Can you handle the critic's table?" I nodded, already moving to prepare a fresh plate, free from contamination. "Of course. And Petra," he added, "I owe you an apology. I should have seen what was happening sooner." That night, Wesley's review table received the best meal I'd ever created. The article that followed 2 weeks later praised the remarkable talent and integrity of Lumiere's head chef. By the time the article was published, Renata had been fired. The police investigation had uncovered more than anyone expected. Her notebook revealed her plans to undermine several staff members, modified recipes with dangerous substitutions, and detailed schemes to take full control of the kitchen by forcing out anyone she perceived as a threat. But Renata's termination didn't feel like victory. The kitchen staff remained wary around me, wondering if I had somehow orchestrated her downfall. The trauma of working under constant sabotage had left its mark on my confidence. "It will take time," Camille told me over coffee. A month after the incident. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. I'm not sure I want to stay, I admitted. Every corner of that kitchen reminds me of her. Camille studied me carefully. What would your grandmother say about that? The question caught me off guard. I'd mentioned my grandmother to Camille only once, briefly sharing how she'd inspired my cooking. She'd tell me that kitchens are meant for creating, not for dwelling on bitterness, I said finally. She'd say, the best revenge against someone who tried to extinguish your flame is to burn brighter. Smart woman, Camille nodded. By the way, have you checked your email today? Dimitri sent something important to all the management staff. I hadn't, and when I opened my inbox that evening, I found a message that changed everything. Dimitri was restructuring the restaurant's leadership. The position of executive chef was open, and he was asking for my decision by the end of the week. Taking the role meant completely redesigning the kitchen culture that Renata had created, a culture of fear, competition, and sabotage. It meant proving that success didn't require destroying others. It meant facing staff who might still harbor doubts about me. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother's kitchen, warm, welcoming, filled with the scents of herbs and spices. I woke with clarity. The next morning, I walked into Dimitri's office with my decision. I'll take the position, I told him, but I want to make some changes. 6 months later, Lumiere was transformed. We implemented an open notebook policy where all recipe development was shared and credited properly. Collaborative dishes became our signature, with multiple chefs contributing components to showcase our diverse talents. The kitchen atmosphere shifted from cutthroat competition to creative collaboration. We instituted a mentorship program for young chefs, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds who needed guidance and opportunity. But the true test came when I received an unexpected email from a prestigious culinary competition. The judges wanted me to participate in their annual Chef's Challenge, SISA, a high-profile event broadcast nationally. The catch? Renata Klein had also been invited, representing a small restaurant in a neighboring city that had taken her in despite the rumors. The email explained that the producers were aware of our professional history and thought the dynamic would make for compelling television. They promised to ensure a fair competition with strict oversight. My finger hovered over the delete button. Did I really want to face her again? In front of cameras and a national audience? What if she tried something during the competition? What if this was her chance to publicly discredit me? I was about to decline when a notification popped up on my phone. A review of Lumiere from a new customer. I've never experienced a restaurant where the food told such a cohesive story of passion and resilience. Each dish felt like a personal narrative from the chef, inviting diners into a journey of transformation. Whatever challenges this kitchen has faced, they've alchemized them into something extraordinary. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I returned to the email and clicked accept. The Chef's Challenge would take place in 3 weeks. I had no idea what Renata might be planning. But this time, I wasn't facing her alone. I had a team that believed in me, a restaurant that stood behind me, and a cooking philosophy that couldn't be corrupted by fear or sabotage. As I closed my laptop, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Is this Petra Nichols? Asked an unfamiliar voice. Yes, speaking. This is Detective Rivera from the Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating Renata Klein's activities at Lumiere, and some discrepancies have emerged. Would you be available to answer some questions tomorrow? My heart raced. What kind of discrepancies? The detective paused. I'd rather discuss it in person, but it involves vendor payments, kickbacks, and some concerning transactions that occurred during her time as executive chef. Your name has come up in some of the documentation. As I hung up the phone, a chill ran through me. Just when I thought the Renata chapter of my life was closing, it seemed there was another page yet to be turned. What financial schemes had she been running? And more importantly, had she somehow implicated me in them? The Chef's Challenge suddenly seemed like the least of my worries. Because if there's one thing more dangerous than a chef with a grudge, it's a chef with a grudge who thinks she has nothing left to lose. The next day, I met Detective Rivera at the police station, Dutch, a stocky woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She led me to a small interview room with a table and 3 chairs. "Thank you for coming in, Miss Nichols," she said, opening a thick folder. "What I'm about to share might be disturbing." She spread out financial documents, invoices, receipts, bank statements, across the table. For the past 4 years, Renata Klein has been running an elaborate scheme at Lumiere. She's been inflating vendor invoices, pocketing the difference, and falsifying inventory records to cover the discrepancies. My stomach tightened as I scanned the documents. "The concerning part," Detective Rivera continued, sliding a stack of papers toward me, "is that several of these fraudulent transactions bear your signature." I stared at the papers in shock. There was my signature, or what appeared to be my signature, on purchase orders for ingredients that never arrived, equipment we never received, and specialty items at 3 times their market value. "This isn't my signature," I said, studying the documents more closely. "I mean, it looks similar, but these aren't my handwriting." "We suspected as much," the detective nodded. "The forgeries are good, but not perfect. Forensic analysis shows inconsistencies." Relief washed over me, but it quickly gave way to a new worry. Why would she forge my signature specifically? Detective Rivera's expression grew serious. We believed she was creating a fall person, someone to take the blame if her schemes were discovered. "The forgeries began shortly after your promotion party incident." The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been focused on surviving daily kitchen battles, Renata had been setting me up for something much worse, potential criminal charges. "There's more," Detective Rivera continued. "We found these in her home office during our search." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen were photographs of me, entering my apartment building, shopping at the market, even talking with Tomas outside the restaurant. In some photos, notes were scrawled in the margins. "Still friendly with Tomas, possible collaborator," and "meets with Camille weekly." Discussing what? She was stalking me, I whispered, cold dread seeping into my bones. "It appears so," Detective Rivera confirmed. "And based on her online search history, she was researching ways to discredit you professionally and personally." "Is she going to jail?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "The financial crimes investigation is ongoing, but we have enough evidence for charges. However, there's a complication." She hesitated. "Renata Klein has disappeared." "Disappeared?" "She hasn't been at her apartment for 3 days. Her phone is off. Her car was found abandoned at a train station. We're treating her as a person of interest who has fled." I left the police station with a security escort and official advice to be vigilant. My mind raced with implications. Renata was gone, possibly on the run, possibly planning something worse than financial fraud. And in 3 weeks, I was supposed to face her at the Chef's Challenge. I called the competition organizers immediately, but they had no information about Renata withdrawing. According to them, she had confirmed her participation just yesterday via email. When I mentioned the police investigation, they were concerned but reluctant to pull her from the competition without charges being filed. "We'll increase security," they promised, "and ensure contestants are never alone together." The following days passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I installed new locks on my apartment door and a security system with cameras. Detective Rivera assigned an officer to drive past my building during night shifts. Meanwhile, I threw myself into planning for the competition. If Renata was going to show up, I needed to be ready, not just culinarily, but mentally and emotionally. The Chef's Challenge format required 3 dishes: an appetizer using a surprise ingredient, a main course showcasing our signature style, and a dessert that told a personal story. 16 chefs would compete in the preliminary round, with 4 advancing to the finals. I practiced for hours after restaurant shifts, testing combinations and techniques until my hands cramped. My team at Lumiere supported me enthusiastically, acting as judges for practice runs and offering honest feedback. "You're overthinking it," Tomas told me one night as I discarded my 5th attempt at a complex dessert. "Your strength has always been honest food, with unexpected twists. This feels like you're trying to impress judges rather than telling your story." He was right. I was so fixated on outperforming Renata that I'd lost sight of my own culinary voice. The next morning, I started fresh. Instead of elaborate constructions, I returned to the flavors my grandmother had taught me, elevated through technique, but true to their origins. The dessert became a simple apple tart with fennel-infused custard, a combination that had delighted me as a child when I accidentally mixed spices in my grandmother's kitchen. A week before the competition, Camille invited me for dinner at her home, insisting I needed a night away from kitchen stress. "Any updates about Renata?" she asked as we sipped wine in her living room. "Nothing. It's like she vanished." I shook my head. "The competition organizers still expect her to compete. Are you sure you want to go through with this? It feels risky." I considered the question seriously. If I withdraw, she wins without even showing up. Besides, there will be security, cameras, other chefs. What could she possibly do? Camille looked unconvinced. "People like Renata don't just give up, they escalate." Her words haunted me that night as I lay awake, staring at my ceiling. What if Renata was planning something beyond simple competition sabotage? What if the chef's challenge was just a means to get close to me again? 2 days before the competition, I received a package at the restaurant, a small box with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with words cut from magazines. "Ready for your final cooking lesson?" Detective Rivera collected the package for evidence, but there wasn't much to trace. "It was delivered by a courier service," she explained, "paid for in cash by someone wearing a hat and sunglasses." The morning of the chef's challenge arrived with a heavy knot in my stomach. The competition was being held in the convention center's grand ballroom, transformed into a cooking arena with individual stations for each chef and a central judge's platform. As I checked in at the registration desk, I scanned the room for Renata. There was no sign of her among the chefs preparing their stations. "Has Renata Klein checked in yet?" I asked the coordinator. "Not yet, but we have chefs arriving until noon," she replied, checking her tablet. "She confirmed yesterday that she'll be here." I set up my station methodically, organizing tools and checking equipment. Camera crews moved around, capturing B-roll footage, and the other chefs made small talk as they prepared. At 11:30, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. Renata had arrived. She looked different, thinner, with her hair cut short and dyed blonde, but her walk was unmistakable, the confident stride of someone who believed the room belonged to her. Our eyes met across the cooking stations, and she smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent chills down my spine. "Contestants, please gather for the pre-competition briefing," announced the head judge, a celebrated chef with 3 Michelin stars. We formed a semicircle in front of the judge's table. I positioned myself between 2 other chefs, keeping maximum distance from Renata, who stood directly across from me. The head judge explained the rules, scoring criteria, and time limits. Then he added, "Due to concerns raised by our security team, we've implemented additional measures today. Each station has its own dedicated camera. All ingredients will be inspected before use, and contestants are not permitted to approach each other's stations for any reason." His gaze lingered on Renata and me, making it clear he knew about our history. "Now, let's reveal the surprise ingredient for the appetizer round." With theatrical flourish, he unveiled a covered platter. "Fresh sea urchin. You have 45 minutes starting now." The kitchen erupted into activity. I focused entirely on my dish, blocking out Renata's presence across the room. Sea urchin was delicate. Its briny sweetness could easily be overwhelmed. I decided on a sea urchin custard with citrus accents and crispy rice paper. Halfway through the round, I glanced up to find Renata staring at me while chopping herbs. She held my gaze as she deliberately sliced through the herbs with unnecessary force, the knife blade glinting under the lights. The message was clear. This wasn't just a cooking competition for her. When time was called, we presented our appetizers to the judges. My sea urchin custard received high praise for its balance and restraint. Renata's sea urchin foam with caviar garnish was described as technically flawless but somewhat cold and impersonal. During the short break before the main course round, I stepped outside for air. A production assistant hurried after me. "Chef Nichols, you're needed back inside. There's an issue with your station." I rushed back to find 3 judges and a security officer standing at my cooking area. My knives, the handcrafted set my grandmother had given me before she died, were missing. "I had them right here," I said, gesturing to the empty knife roll. They were here when I left. The head judge frowned. The station cameras show someone approaching your station during the break, but their back was to the camera. My eyes immediately went to Renata, who was calmly preparing her ingredients across the room as if nothing had happened. We'll provide you with replacement knives, offered the judge, and we'll review all security footage. The replacement knives were quality tools but unfamiliar in my hands. As I began preparing my main course, a duck breast with fermented plum sauce that had become my signature at Lumiere, I struggled to find my rhythm. Halfway through the round, a security officer approached me discreetly. "We found these in the women's restroom trash," he whispered, revealing my knife roll. "They appear undamaged." Relief flooded through me as I reclaimed my tools. But the incident had cost me precious minutes. I raced to complete my dish, finishing just as the timer buzzed. The judges noted that my duck was slightly overcooked but praised the complexity of the sauce. Renata's main course, a lobster preparation with 20 different elements, received mixed reviews. "Impressive technique," said one judge, "but it lacks soul." The dessert round would determine which 4 chefs advanced to the finals. As we prepared for the final challenge, I felt Renata's eyes boring into me from across the room. "For this round," announced the head judge, "create a dessert that tells us your personal story. You have 1 hour." I began preparing my apple tart, working methodically to create the delicate fennel custard. Across the room, Renata was constructing an elaborate chocolate sculpture, her movements precise and calculated. With 15 minutes remaining, disaster struck. As I removed my tart from the oven, someone bumped into me from behind. The hot pan tilted, and my tart slid sideways, breaking apart as it hit the counter. I turned to find a camera operator backing away. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there." Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I stared at my ruined dessert. There wasn't time to start over. Around me, the other chefs continued working, unaware of my crisis. Then, clarity cut through the panic. This is exactly what Renata wanted, to see me fail publicly, to watch me break down on national television. I refused to give her that satisfaction. I took a deep breath and assessed what remained salvageable. The custard was intact. Pieces of the tart could be repurposed. I could create a deconstructed version, not what I had planned, but perhaps even more meaningful. As the clock ticked down, I arranged the broken tart pieces on individual plates, adding custard and fresh apple slices. I titled it Rebuilding and finished just as time was called. When the judges reached my station, I explained, "This dessert represents my journey. Sometimes life breaks apart what we've carefully created, but the essential flavors, the truth of who we are, remains. We simply find new ways to present ourselves to the world." The head judge tasted a spoonful and closed his eyes. "This is unexpectedly moving. The contrast between the shattered pastry and the smooth custard creates a narrative on the plate." The judges moved on to Renata's station, where her chocolate sculpture depicted a phoenix rising from flames. "My story is about rebirth after betrayal," she explained, her eyes flicking toward me, "about rising stronger after being unfairly cast out." The judges nodded appreciatively at the technical skill, but one commented, "The chocolate itself is slightly bitter. Was that intentional?" "Bitterness is part of my story," Renata replied smoothly. After tasting all 16 desserts, the judges retreated to deliberate. The chefs waited tensely in the green room, separated from one another by production assistants. An hour later, we were called back to hear the results. The head judge stood at the center of the cooking arena, cameras trained on his face. 4 chefs will advance to tomorrow's finals. They are. He named the first finalist, a young chef from Seattle, known for innovative seafood preparations. Then the second, a veteran chef from Chicago with a farm-to-table philosophy. Our third finalist is Petra Nichols from Lumiere. Relief and pride washed over me as applause filled the room. Just one spot remained, and our final contestant advancing to tomorrow's championship round is. The room went silent as he paused for dramatic effect. Chef Lydia Martinez from San Antonio. Renata's name wasn't called. She stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief that quickly morphed into fury. As the eliminated chefs were instructed to clear their stations, she remained rooted in place. I gathered my knives and belongings, careful to keep everything in sight. As I turned to leave, Renata suddenly appeared before me. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "You think you've won? I've only just begun." A security officer stepped between us. "Chef Klein, please clear your station immediately." As she was escorted away, she called over her shoulder, "See you at the after party, Petra. I made something special just for you." The threat hung in the air as I watched her leave. The competition after party was a tradition, a chance for all participants to mingle with judges and sponsors regardless of the results. I had planned to attend briefly, but now I wasn't sure. Detective Rivera had warned me to avoid any situation where Renata might have access to food or drink I would consume. But skipping the party would appear unprofessional and possibly affect sponsorship opportunities. I called Detective Rivera from the green room. "She threatened me directly," I explained after describing the day's events. "Said she made something special for me at the after party. I'll have officers there," she promised, "and I'd advise you not to consume anything unless you've seen it prepared." The party was held in the convention center's rooftop garden, an elegant space with panoramic city views. Chefs, judges, sponsors, and media mingled over cocktails and hors d'oeuvres prepared by the convention center staff. I entered cautiously, immediately scanning the room for Renata. She stood near the bar, deep in conversation with one of the sponsors. When our eyes met, she raised her glass in mock toast. I kept my distance, accepting congratulations from judges and fellow chefs while declining all offered food and drink. An hour into the event, the head judge clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to thank all our contestants for their outstanding work today," he began. "Before we wrap up this evening, we have a special presentation from our sponsors." A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. "A special blend created by our beverage sponsor," explained the judge as glasses were distributed. When a flute was offered to me, I politely declined. "Just water for me, thank you." Renata, who had somehow materialized nearby, smirked. "Afraid of a little champagne, Petra? How unprofessional." The sponsor representative looked uncomfortable. "It's a special honor. The blend was created specifically for this event." I felt the eyes of everyone in the room. Refusing would seem petty and paranoid, but accepting. "Perhaps we could toast with our own preferred beverages," I suggested. "I'm preparing for tomorrow's finals and avoiding alcohol." The head judge nodded approvingly. A responsible choice. As the toast commenced, I noticed Renata watching me intently, disappointment evident in her expression. Whatever she had planned had been thwarted, at least for now. I left the party shortly after, escorted to my hotel by a security officer provided by the competition organizers. Despite the protective measures, I slept fitfully, dreaming of broken tarts and poisoned champagne. The finals the next day were intense but exhilarating. Without Renata's presence, I cooked with renewed freedom and creativity. When the results were announced, I had placed second overall, a remarkable achievement that would bring valuable attention to Lumiere. As I packed my knives after the competition, my phone rang. It was Detective Rivera. "Congratulations on your placement," she said, "and I have news you'll want to hear. Renata Klein was arrested an hour ago." My heart stuttered. "For what?" One of the waiters at the after-party noticed her adding something to a champagne flute before service. He reported it to security, who detained her discreetly. "The substance has been identified as ipecac syrup. It would have made you violently ill during your final competition today." Relief washed over me, but also a strange emptiness. It was over, truly over. Renata would face charges for attempted poisoning on top of the financial crimes. "There's something else," Detective Rivera added. "During her arrest, we found documentation suggesting she's been sabotaging other chefs throughout her career. You weren't her first target, just the one who finally exposed her." 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the prison where Renata awaited trial. For days, I left it unopened on my kitchen counter, unsure if I wanted to read whatever justifications or accusations she had written. When I finally opened it, the message was brief. "You think you've won, but look around your precious kitchen. How many faces still question you? How many wonder if I was right about you all along? That's my real revenge. The seeds of doubt I planted will grow long after I'm gone. R." I read the letter twice, then dropped it into the shredder. She was wrong. The kitchen at Lumiere had transformed in the months since her departure. Trust had replaced suspicion. Collaboration had replaced competition. We were creating the best food of our careers in an environment where everyone could thrive. That evening, as service began, I gathered my kitchen staff. Today marks 6 months since we began our new chapter here. I told them. I want to thank each of you for your trust and creativity. I didn't mention Renata or her letter. She didn't deserve space in our kitchen anymore. As we prepared for service, Tomas nudged me. Have you seen the latest restaurant rankings? We moved up to number 3 in the city. I smiled, checking the final plating on an appetizer. Next year, we'll be number 1. With your dessert from the competition added to our menu? Definitely. He hesitated. You know, I always wondered, how did you stay so calm when your tart broke during the competition? Most chefs would have fallen apart. I considered his question as I wiped a smudge from the plate's rim. I realized something in that moment. Renata spent years trying to break me. My confidence, my reputation, my career. When that tart shattered, I understood that broken pieces can still create something beautiful if you're not afraid to reimagine them. The maitre d' appeared at the kitchen entrance. First seating is full. Everyone's asking for the executive chef's special. I nodded, straightening my chef's coat. Let's show them what we can do. As I moved through my kitchen, my domain, I felt a sense of peace. The ultimate revenge against someone like Renata wasn't public humiliation or professional destruction. It was simply this: thriving in the space she had tried to deny me, creating beauty from the broken pieces she had left behind, and most importantly, remembering that the best kitchens are built on lifting others up, not tearing them down. That night, every dish that left our kitchen told that story, a story of resilience, transformation, and the quiet power of refusing to become the thing that tried to destroy you. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience and redemption. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone tried to break you? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you turned broken pieces into something beautiful.